Hello, and welcome to Pique My Interest, a podcast dedicated to creativity. My name is Scoob Decker, and I am an artist, and your host. Pique My Interest is an exploration in meeting some incredible artists, learning about their craft, and exploring what makes them create. The next guest takes a stainy craft and turns it into fashion with a story. Karissa Noonan is an incredible tie-dye artist who specializes in saturated colors and unique designs. Her craft, which was a hobby, has turned into her company Peace, Love, and Tie-Dye that showcases her deep, vibrant, and impactful colors on anything and everything you can wear. While most are familiar with the classic tie-dye spiral, Karissa has learned how to stun you with her Northern Lights imagery, vortex swirls, checkers, and even creates recognizable mythical creatures and zoo animals in her designs. Karissa was influenced by her hippie-centered culture in college, but always knew that the art was missing her touch and decided to explore. Because of its temperament and unpredictability, it is a craft of experimentation. You need a little voice in your head that says, "Hey, what happens if you do this? If I fold it this way, stain it this way, dye it this way, what will it look like? How can I take this old school craft and put it into a modern space?" Karissa implores you to find your taste and signature. Start small, explore. Then find what needs to be giving more time and money to excel. Peace, Love, and Tie-Dye is a rebranding into her new company, A Crow of Many Colors, which includes more of Karissa's art, including her jewelry making. This episode was recorded on June 22nd in Phoenix, Arizona. I hope you look up their work and your interest is piqued. I hope you're having a grand day, and please enjoy this week's episode I've titled Loud and Chaotic. Hello, and welcome to Pique My Interest. I am currently in Phoenix, Arizona, sitting with this incredible artist. How are you doing today?
I'm great, Scoob.
Excellent. Have you done anything interesting lately?
Oh, not really.
No?
I don't think so. No, it's been chill.
Yeah, which I think is what you've been...
It's what I've been needing, craving.
Excellent. Now, please, pique our interest. Introduce yourself. Tell us your name and where you're from.
I'm Karissa. I'm from here. I'm from Phoenix, Arizona, born and raised. I have lived kind of all over the state, which has been fun. Arizona's beautiful. Phoenix less so, but it's kind of a cool place, I guess. It is warm. Wow. Yeah, we're finally making our way out of it.
Yes.
This is like the first under 100-degree week.
Finally able to enjoy the outside here. Now, please, tell us, what is your craft?
Tie-dye.
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 Fantastic.
Intentionally staining clothes.
You do other things. You make jewelry.
I sure do.
What else do you do?
I embroider. I paint. I'm a musician. I sing. All kinds of art and music adjacent.
Yeah, so you've also been in the theater a little bit.
A little bit. I was a tech. Never on stage.
Okay.
Yeah, not for me.
Making sure everything's going well backstage.
Correct.
What I'd like to focus on is your tie-dye art.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here. What is your specialty within tie-dye?
I think my specialty within tie-dye is creating like really saturated tie-dye. Sometimes you see a lot of white in a shirt. I like wall-to-wall color. I also really like playing with patterns and playing with colorways that you don't necessarily see in tie-dye all the time.
Mm-hmm. And does that make your work different than others who work in tie-dye?
I don't know that answer. I am the only person that I know who does this semi-regularly.
There's not a competing tie-dye culture here in Phoenix?
Not in Phoenix, no. Shocking. Yeah. I follow like several artists online. Everybody really has their own style. I don't know where I fall in that exactly, but I think that I have a unique perspective. Yeah. I think that I bring something different to the table.
Bringing your Karissa to your tie-dye.
That's right.
I love it. Now, what's your background? Do you have any education? I assume not much education in tie-dye, but where's your art background?
Yeah, I was kind of always an art kid. I was in Girl Scouts growing up, and so very crafty. My mom is one of the most creative people I've ever seen, and I was in music the whole time. So I started taking piano lessons when I was 8, I believe, and just did that all through high school. I was always in band. I was always in choir. So I ended up going to school I did my undergrad in choral music education. It's where I learned how to tie-dye. That's where I got a lot of my inspiration for tie-dye. It's also where I learned how to silversmith.
Which leads into your jewelry making.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And what was your upbringing? You said you're mainly from the Phoenix area.
Mm-hmm.
What about your upbringing turned you into a creator?
I think it was my mom more than anything else. She is a speech pathologist on the reservation in Tempe. So she works with littles, and she always has some creative project. I think initially to keep us entertained and to keep us out of trouble. But when I was a baby, she would make really thick instant mashed potatoes, like not the proper amount of water, and then give it to us as Play-Doh. So that you could put it in your mouth because you're an infant and don't know better. But we would build things out of Play-Doh. Like, this is the parent that I grew up with.
And it's safe. No microplastics or lead or
Right.
asbestos or anything. It's tasty, too. Well, fantastic. Well, you grew up with your mom who kind of influenced you to become an artist. But what piqued your interest about tie-dye?
Yeah, tie-dye specifically. I went to school in Flagstaff, which has a very active outdoor community. There's a lot of like the environmental, how do I want to say it? The hippies live in Flagstaff. Flagstaff, there's the really strong outdoor community. There's tons of people who just want to be outside all the time. Lots of crunchy granolas everywhere. So tie-dye is alive up there. And I saw a lot of the same shirts all the time. I saw a lot of the spirals, a lot of rainbows, a lot of either monochrome, it's just blue on blue. And I started to get really curious about what tie-dye could be. I wanted to know how to make different shapes and what happens if I fold it this way. So I actually reached out to one of my Girl Scout leaders of my childhood, who I knew was into tie-dye, and she told me everything that she used, all of her tips and tricks, gave me all of the advice. So I started kind of small. My family was in town, and we had a tie-dye day. So fun. So we got to do this big batch of tie-dye. None of us knew what we were doing. Like, all of us had maybe tie-dyed 1 or 2 other times, like you do at summer camp or daycare or wherever it is that you first made a tie-dye shirt. But they turned out really cool, and it just never went away from me, that curiosity, that like, okay, I see now what happened when I pleated it this way and dyed it that way. What if I do it differently?
This way.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned that tie-dye usually has an affiliation with the crunchy granolas, the hippie culture. Do you feel that that is the representation of tie-dye?
For me, I've really tried to push it into a modern space. If it's cotton, I'm going to try to dye it. So making a crop top that is like a little bit more edgy, a little bit more fashion forward, like something that I feel like today I kind of look like the crunchy granola, and I'm into that too. Like, that's absolutely, I'm here for it. But I really like the idea of, I've gotten to dye a suit jacket for somebody and make something it's like interesting and not at all Woodstock. It's I don't know, something different.
Yeah. I think you're taking something that was made for an art form for the poor man, and you're creating this art form for everyone.
Yeah.
I love that. And speaking of, not only are you just doing this for fun, you have created your own company.
I sure have.
Please tell us about Peace, Love, and Tie-Dye.
Yeah, Peace, Love, and Tie-Dye was a present, actually. A birthday gift. My partner loved that I made tie-dye and knew that I would never jump through the bureaucratic hoops by myself. So for my birthday 5 years ago, he gave me a brand, he gave me a domain, he gave me a platform to run the website through, and business cards. And he said, if you don't end up doing anything with this, that's fine, but I really think that this should be something that you lean into and do forever. That he had never seen tie-dye like I was making, and it got him excited, and so he wanted to be part of that. It's still one of the best gifts that I've ever received, because he was right. I would have never done it for myself. And now that I've sat with it for 5 years, like, I can't imagine not having a website and a social media platform to talk about these things that I like to make. Zachary.
Yeah. Shout out to Zachary. Thank you for that, and allowing Peace, Love, and Tie-Dye to allow Karissa to free flow with the tie-dye. Now let's get into it a little bit. How do you start to tie-dye? What's your creation process like?
I have kind of a running list of ideas. Like, I'll be watching a movie or reading a book, even listening to music, be out somewhere in the world and see something that someone else is wearing, not necessarily tie-dye, but just a combination of colors that I would have never come up with on my own. So I just have this little, hey, what about that? What happens if I put bleach in a balloon and pop it over a shirt? I just want to see what that looks like. So I keep a little list. Some of the best ideas have come to me. You know, maybe I've smoked too much weed that night.
Okay. All right.
And then the next day I wake up and I go, oh, look, that's a great idea.
Or
thank you, myself.
That was not a good idea.
But that's usually where it starts, is just this like, ooh, I wonder what that would be. And so I go back through that list every now and again and see what is piquing my interest at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love what you were talking about earlier, that your strive to create that new kind of tie-dye. Everything I've seen from you, from your website, from what you're wearing now, it is very non-traditional. It doesn't have that spiral. It doesn't have that rainbow. You're able to create these different shapes and use these vibrant colors in different ways we've never seen. How have you learned to create different shapes and different patterns? And how do you choose which colors to pick?
Yeah, solid question. I don't know. A lot of trial and error for the patterns. YouTube is also a great resource. Tons of people are making stuff all the time. That's how I learned how to do like a peace symbol or a heart. And then I went, okay, so if it's symmetrical, I kind of get how that works. Can I make a sloth? Can I make a little panda? What can I do? And it doesn't always work, but I always learn something.
Do you find that you're creating a lot of these patterns yourself, going off of what other people have kind of done online, and you're experimenting, you're finding this, and then you've got it, and then do you kind of like write down your pattern so you can save it for later?
So for some, yes. There have been a few that I just kind of freehand onto the shirt. I use, a washable marker, kind of scribble out something, pleat it, see what it does. Like the sloth, for instance, that's a one and done. I don't think I could ever replicate that thing. I didn't even think it was going to work the first time. I did a collaboration with another podcaster. His name is John Rossi. He does Rossafari. And we did these red pandas. For that one, I did draw the shape, the outline of the panda face on a stencil, because it had to line up with a screen print that I put on top of it after I tie-dyed it. So that one I do have in the archives, that lives in my closet rent-free, and I can pull that out at any time and replicate that guy.
And how much does your process change or adapt while you're working on it?
Oh, constantly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've had ideas that even while I'm just trying to tie the shirt, I'm struggling to get it to stay. I mean, it's cloth. It doesn't want to fold like paper. It doesn't want to crease or like stay put. So I've had to adjust like mid make. I've also, had an entire colorway picked out, had all the dye lined up, and then as I'm putting it on the shirt, I'm inspired to do something else and just go with the flow on that. Yeah.
And I guess it's not like painting a different art medium where if you don't like something, you can kind of just paint over it. This is dye that sinks in, it's stayed, it's permanent. So you have to be able to work with it and figure out what's the next step. Yeah. That's a very interesting mentality in art. I love that.
Yeah. It's also one that any of the light colors are going to get overpowered with the dark colors. And so that's something to...
Yeah. So in turn, you've had to learn a lot of art theory with tie-dye.
Yeah.
I love that. And now you've experimented, you've figured out your product, you've created a company. To me, that says you're successful with tie-dye. Do you consider yourself successful? What really got you succeeding in tie-dye?
I think that I was successful with tie-dye from the get, just because I was playing. I think that success in art is just doing it. I really believe that like, even if you're not the best musician in the entire world, or you're not even a great singer, the act of making noise, you're doing what we're meant to do. Find joy in anything. So as long as it's a joyful process, I feel like it's a successful one.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of joyous things, do you have any hobbies? You've already talked about going outside and being outdoors. Do you have any other hobbies, and do they complement or contradict your craft?
I have lots of hobbies. I dabble.
I
like to dabble. I like to play. I love to cook. I think that's probably a hobby of mine. That seems very different. I do love to be outside. I love to camp. I love to backpack. But I think like one of my biggest outlets is music. I sing in the Phoenix Symphony Chorus, and I love it. It's a community of musicians that are just all top notch. We're all volunteers, and there's like 150 of us singing with the symphony on that stage downtown Phoenix. And it's just the coolest thing. It's some of the most fun music. It's more master works than I ever got to do studying choir. Like, I went to school for choral music, and in a year with the symphony chorus, I get to perform that many master works. I love it. I just love it.
Wow. That's very cool. So you took what you studied in school, and that's kind of now like a hobby, and you've created an art form, which has turned into a little bit of a career. But also, on top of everything, you have a whole nother career. What do you do for a living, Karissa?
I work for a screen printing and embroidery company. So it feels at home. Like, it feels like a little corner where everything meets. I was in food and beverage for the longest time, so I still have that customer service aspect. But I get to walk people through creating their own t-shirts or uniforms, and I really like it. It's a lot of fun. I understand the process, the production process, which really helps me to communicate between like our clients and that and the making. So I know what's possible and what's not, and I can very effectively tell someone without, destroying their dreams that maybe we have to edit your design a little bit.
Yeah. I love that. I love that you've tied together a lot of your different parts of your lives into this new career form that in turn is helping out different aspects of your life. Yeah. And speaking of which, you were briefly mentioned about a little bit of a rebrand earlier from Karissa. Yeah. So be on the lookout. We might not see too much more peace, love, and tie-dye, but it will still be there. It'll just be lumped into a whole nother thing where we will see more of Karissa's hobbies, like her jewelry making. Yeah. What kind of jewelry do you make?
I make rings, earrings, necklaces is really where I've lived so far. And I don't know if I've had enough time with metalsmithing to know my style yet. I know that it's changed a lot, even in the last year, but I really like simple, minimal, geometric, and like sharp for jewelry. It feels like the opposite that I bring to the table from tie-dye is like loud and chaos and I never actually know what it's going to turn into, where metal is more precision, actual math, and more of a plan.
Do you think you'll ever combine the tie-dye and the jewelry making one day?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yes. I've kind of always had it in my head this rebrand is part of it, that I want everything to be under the umbrella. But I really like the idea of having, tie-dye inspired by gemstones or inspired by, or complementing, going with companion pieces like earrings that are matching this shirt, and who knows? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then going just a little bit further, for somebody who's trying to get into tie-dye, what would be your recommendation for that? Would you say school? I don't know if there's much of a tie-dye school out there. Or what would be your recommendation?
For tie-dye, DM me. I'll tell you everything. I love it. I think it's so fun. And I really believe that tie-dye is something that, like, while it's probably not going to turn out the way that you think it is going to, it's hard to mess it up. Like, you're always going to get something neat, some beautiful outcome. So I just, talk to me. I'll tell you, as long as you have the right chemicals and a really decent quality dye, it's easy to do. Mm-hmm. It's time consuming, but it's easy to do. Don't go to Michael's and buy the kit, or do, that's fine, but it's not great dye. You're not, the outcome's not going to be very exciting. You're not going to get that like bright, vibrant color from the RIT dyes at a Michael's, but I'll tell you everything.
Well, so let's get into a little bit. What is tie-dye? What is the process? I assume there's tying involved and there's dyeing involved.
You're exactly correct. Yeah, absolutely. There's also, I think that's the biggest misconception about tie-dye, is that it's quick. Some of the tying and the dyeing, that's the least of it. It's, a couple hours of prep and setup. You have to put every garment in a dye fixer and have it sit there, let it soak in. You have to prepare the shirt for the dye. I use powdered pigment. That's how I get such bright colors, is I can control the amount of pigment that goes into my dyes, but I have to mix them. So mixing the liquid dye is another hour. So let's say 2 hours of setup and prep. Tying and dyeing, probably another 2 hours for 7 to 10 pieces. And then it has to sit there for 12 to 24 hours. I think that's the other part that people don't always do or know, that like once you've dyed it, you can wash it, right? For the dye to fix and really adhere to the fibers of the shirt, it has to hang out for quite a while. And then you have to rinse it, and then you have to wash it. So it's like a solid 2 days of work to get a handful of shirts. And the tying and the dyeing is like this much of
it. Yeah. But that's what everybody wants to see.
That's the fun part.
Everybody wants to see
it
you
really
wrapping
is.
up the shirts in a fun little pattern. And...
Trust and believe. If I didn't ever have to clean up my bottles, I'd be so happy.
Don't we all just wish to make enough money as an artist to hire somebody to clean up after us?
Oh boy, that's the dream.
And speaking of all these materials, and you've talked about how often you like to experiment, it sounds like it's starting to get a little expensive for somebody starting out in tie-dye. What would be your advice for somebody getting started in tie-dye, and how to overcome that sort of speed bump?
I think that you can do it. I mean, I know that you can because I started so small. The chemicals that you need are not terribly expensive. The dyes only get expensive when you have, I probably have 30 different colors at this point. You can start with 2, pick a couple colors that you're excited about and learn that way. If you don't have, the correct type of washer, or if you don't want to ruin your washer, take it to a laundromat. Like, it's fine. I don't know. Most of them post, like, not dyed. Please don't put that into our washers. But some places don't care. So I think there is a way to, like, start basic. Silversmithing, I think, is a little bit more of an expensive hobby. But there are really incredible studios all over the place that, yeah, it's pricey for a class, But my favorite spot, it's called the Herald Studio. It's in downtown Phoenix, maybe like midtown Phoenix. But they offer a 5-week class. It's $300, and that's access to all of your equipment, and they give you materials. So yeah, that's not insignificant. You know, $300 is a lot of money. But when you think of it as like 5 classes and everything that you need to learn if this is actually something that you like and something that you're into, something that you're good at, that's, I think, a good place to start, just to get your feet wet. There's also extremely basic equipment I'm still working with, like a $20 butane torch, and that's how I'm melting metal in my garage. So I really do think that there is a way to start small with any of these hobbies. And then for me, it's been exciting to have the business side of it, because it's really turned into something that I get to do and it pays for itself.
I'm excited that we're talking about tie-dye as an art form, not as your main career. What would be your advice for somebody getting into not even tie-dye, but just trying to do art as not a career? Where are you finding the time to do all this?
Oh, where indeed? Also a great question, because I haven't quite figured out the balance, you know? Like, going to work is a time suck. And will always be, you know, that's 40 hours out of your life plus transit. And then I have a house and pets that I take care of. I have a partner who I love and spend as much quality time with as possible. So it really is prioritizing and setting that time aside for myself. We share a calendar, and I'll put in blocks of time that are, you know, throughout the week, an hour here, an hour there, but then on a weekend, maybe I take, you know, a 6-hour chunk to really get into it.
And then more advice about tie-dyeing. Would you advise trying out things that people have seen online and trying to do patterns that they've seen to try and replicate that? Or would you encourage people to try and think outside of the box and just create their own stuff and just start working and figuring it out?
I think both are really important. I think that if you don't have the out-of-the-box idea, don't limit yourself by not making art until you have the out-of-the-box idea. For me, replicating patterns that I saw online, that's how I figured out how to get the patterns that I was seeing in my head. If I started from, I think I can make this, but I don't know how, versus how do I make a heart shape, I think that I probably would have gotten frustrated quickly, because it is one of the, it's a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of like, oh, okay, I see now that if I put a lot of black next to yellow, I don't really have the same shape anymore that I thought I was going to, because that black has now bled all the way into the yellow, and what should have been a heart is now a V. It looks very strange.
So you've got a V, or your heart's upside down, or the colors are bleeding. How do you overcome a creative block?
I have had my fair share in different forms and flavors. With the mistakes, sometimes I lean into that. If you scroll through my Instagram, you'll see the cutest snowman tie-dye. It's just this like really precious frosty guy. And if you look at the post right before it, it's terrifying. They're the scariest little snow monsters you've ever seen. So sometimes it's fun to remember that like things don't go to plan and get humbled a little bit.
That was the Halloween snowman.
That was the Halloween. They're hilarious. I love them. But I have an added benefit. One of my best friends is an artist by trade. She's incredibly talented. Bethany Fortner Art, go follow. You will love her forever. But she is always willing to take my mistakes and cut them up and turn them into something colorful, but not, you know, if it really didn't turn out the way that I wanted it to, and it's not something that needs to be out in the world. She's made tie-dye scrunchies before. She had a baby about a year ago. For her baby shower, we did tie-dye onesies. And now that her kiddo is a year old, she's outgrown all of the onesies. Bethany turned them into a quilt because all of her friends and family made these, and it's important to keep them. So now she has this baby blanket of all of these tie-dye onesies. Wildly creative. Things I would never come up with. She's made tote bags out of my scrap tie-dye before. Like she comes up with these really cool things and says, hey, do you have any more garbage tie-dye? Because I have some stuff I could make. and then I see her kiddo running around in a little dress that it used to be a mistake tie-dye. And I'm like, that's great.
Yeah, what I appreciate about your work is that, as I've mentioned before, your style is very different than a lot of traditional tie-dye. And what I've learned a lot about pique my interest artists, that they're all trying to tell a story. And I love that yours definitely evokes a feeling, like it gives a different sense of story behind these, and that the fact that people want to be able to keep them, even when their kids outgrow them, they want to be able to continue to look at these and be able to take them in. So again, I just want to say thank you for your work. You've talked a little bit about some misconceptions about tie-dye, and I'm sure there's quite a few. It's time to clear the air. Are there any misconceptions about tie-dye?
I think that it's fast is the biggest one. It takes a lot of time. It's a lot of process. I think also, like, anybody can do it. I don't think that's a misconception. Anybody can do it well, maybe a misconception. But I think it has to do more with quality of materials and having the patience, knowing the process. I think the biggest misconception about tie-dye is just how it's going to turn out. My best advice for anybody who ever wants to do a tie-dye shirt is to not be afraid of the dye. Put a lot on there. Trust it. Just keep adding dye.
It's so scary.
Yeah, sure.
And again, I think that you are blowing the misconception that this is a 70s art form that's made for the common man or the poor man. Like, I think you've really brought tie-dye into modern fashion. So again, thank you for that.
I think that tie-dye has never really gone away. I think that staining clothes has been part of humanity. Like, we have documented tie-dye from, I think, like 4000 AD or BC. I don't remember. But, like, people have been decorating their clothing as long as they've been wearing clothing. And what an easier way than to stain it, especially when it gets dirty. That's another one of my favorite things to do is when somebody like has their most favorite shirt that they've ever worn and then they get a big stain on it. Bring it to me. I will stain it more and you're going to love it all over again. Yeah, it's so nice. I used to never buy white clothes because I am a mess. But now I'm happy to buy a white dress, wear it one time with the knowledge that there will probably be red wine on it by the end of the night. And then I get to make tie-dye out of it. That's fun. That like takes away some of the fear of just like clothing needing to be perfect forever. But I think that tie-dye comes in and out. It like has its moments where it's very loud. It's like at the forefront, but it never goes away. I've been doing this for 12 years and I've already seen at least 2 like spikes in mainstream fashion where tie-dye is like on a runway. Yeah, and I don't think it's ever gonna leave forever. I think it's something that can evolve with us.
Yeah. I hope it does. Now, you just mentioning stains on shirts and dresses sounds like you've got some fun or interesting stories. Can you tell us any of them?
I mean, yeah. My partner had a high-top pair of Vans. He loved these shoes. They're all white. And at his nephew's bar mitzvah, we had a lot of fun. It was great. But on the dance floor, by the time we left, he realized that his shoes had gotten spilled on quite a bit by all of the 13-year-old children. Just happens. And he was a little sad. He loved those shoes. And so when we got home, I dyed them. One shoe was purple, one shoe was blue, a little bit of extra color on each one. And he rocked those until the soles fell out. Like, he was upset that his favorite shoes were ruined, and then all of a sudden, they're not. they're the coolest thing you own. Nobody else has those. So it's just really fun to give new life to something that somebody cares about already.
Yeah, I love that. And what's next for the world of tie-dye? Do you see any new trends happening or anything that we can look out for?
I don't ever know how to forecast the trends. I just like to lean into whatever I'm feeling at the moment, which lately has been like neutrals, like a lot of earthy types of color palettes. I've been seeing a lot of that where it's like burnt oranges and dark greens, where you're used to seeing very bright colors.
Yeah.
Or pastels have been massive leading up to now, and I think it's getting a little bit more broody. And I like that. That's fun.
And what's next for you personally? We talked a little bit about this rebranding. Do you want to mention what it might turn into?
I'm extremely excited about it. I have been trying for a long time. As I said, Zach gave me peace, love, and tie-dye. It's been such an incredible experience, and I really attach to those words, that sentiment. And it's extremely popular as a handle, as a website. I am not the only peace, love, and tie-dye, just spelled differently, or like with and instead of an ampersand, or with a hyphen or without a hyphen. And so trying to find something that's a little bit more unique in just as far as I've had people order from not me, intending to order from me.
Oh, no.
Because it's just so, it's popular. It's out there. So trying to find something that's more unique and more unique to me, but that also opens me up and isn't just tie-dye. I want to be able to make macrame planters and dip them in dye if I so choose. I want to make like cool graphic tees that don't have any tie-dye on them at all. Like I want to make all of these things. And because Peace, Love, and Tie-Dye says it in the title, I've shied away from it. So we're heading towards a crow of many colors. I'm very excited about that name. If I were a creature, I would be a crow. They remember faces super well, and if they like you, they bring you presents. So this is me, and it opens me up. It lets me make what I want to make when I want to make it, and hyperfixate on things that aren't tie-dye, and still share them, and still feel like I'm being true to my brand and representing myself.
I'm glad you think that about crows, because all I think about is Edgar Allan Poe and getting together and forming a murder.
See, and I like that. I don't know. That's kind of fun.
It's coming from the person wearing a bright, vibrant tie-dye shirt right now. And I know that we've seen your work on stage before. In the Arizona Broadway Theater's production of Escape to Margaritaville, you were commissioned to do almost all of the costumes for it, and everybody was rocking your tie-dye.
I loved it.
That is so cool.
It was so cool. It's like one of my most favorite moments of tie-dye in my life. Like I loved getting to make them, but then seeing them on those characters in that story, and how much every actor that got to wear one of those pieces, how attached they were to it. That's cool. That's just cool.
And then the final bows, I'm sure you teared up a little bit. And
I'm just like looking across, like, oh, I made that.
That is so cool. And where can we see your work? Or where can we purchase some of your work?
Yes, for now. I have two sites, two Instagram handles. peacelovetieDye.com is my website. peacelovetieDye.phx is the Instagram. And then KLN Makes is my jewelry. Another reason for a rebrand, because while those are my initials, they all sound the same when you're trying to say them out loud. So it's just easier to communicate. A crow of many colors is where we're going. That domain exists. I have it. That handle exists. I have it. It's not real yet. Don't go to there yet.
Well, I'm not sure when this episode will be released, so hopefully if it's in 2025,
so if it's January, a crow of many colors.com.
I can't thank you enough for joining me and piquing my interest. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we wrap up?
I'm so grateful for this opportunity. This is really fun. It's baby's first podcast, so I have no idea how this goes walking into it, and I'm really grateful. It's fun to be here.
Well, thank you. Again, this is my little passion project, and I'm still trying to figure it out too. So just thank you for being here and responding to me and taking time out of your busy schedule. And we've had to reschedule this a few times, but thank you so much. And before we do this, I'm going to open up my little... I have my own Peace, Love, and Tie-Dye shirt. It's gorgeous.
It's an OG.
Thank you.
Yes.
And before we wrap up, I always like to ask one last question. If you could excel at any craft other than your own, or many of your crafts, what would you like to do?
What would I like to do? Man, I feel like construction. So strange. When I was a theater tech, I learned how to weld one time, and it was one of the coolest things that I've ever gotten to do. It was the coolest I've ever felt. Mm-hmm. I felt like such a badass. Welding? Are you kidding me? Helmet? Yes. So I feel like, I don't know, building homes would be such a fun craft, something to be good at. Or some kind of outdoor survival.
Okay.
would be rad.
I've always wanted to be able to build my own home.
Right?
And live in it and be proud of it.
Yeah. I have a friend who builds targets. That's his job. And he can drywall anything. He goes in with no fear. He'll sledgehammer a wall down and just knows that he can build it right back up. And I'm like, that's a really cool skill.
That's a useful trait. Well, again, I can't thank you enough, and thank you to all my peekers out there. Please let me know if you know of any special or unique art forms or artists you think I should explore. I'm currently in Phoenix, Arizona, and can't wait to see where Pique My Interest takes me next. Remember, creativity comes from the heart. Push yourselves, be kind to each other. I'm Scoop Decker, and thank you for helping me pique my interest.